AITA for refusing to give my late grandfather's house to my estranged sister, even though she's struggling. I, 32M, recently inherited my late grandfather's house, and it has caused an absolute storm in my family. To understand why, I need to give some background about my family situation, particularly regarding my sister, Rachel, 34F. Rachel and I were never particularly close growing up. She was the golden child. Our parents absolutely adored her, while I always felt like an afterthought. She was naturally smart, excelled in school, and our parents constantly bragged about her achievements. Meanwhile, I was the kid who had to struggle for any bit of recognition. It didn't help that Rachel had a way of getting her way by playing the victim whenever she got in trouble. Things really fell apart between us when she turned 18. She decided she wanted to be free and moved across the country, cutting off most contact with our family. My parents were devastated, constantly reaching out to her, begging her to stay in touch. She barely responded, only popping back into our lives when she needed money. I, on the other hand, was left dealing with our parents' disappointment and their constant, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" comments. Despite all of this, my grandfather always treated me differently. He saw how much I was overshadowed and made an effort to include me in his life. He taught me about carpentry, took me fishing, and always made sure I knew I was valued. He was the one person in my family who never compared me to Rachel, and that meant everything to me. When my grandfather passed away last year, I was heartbroken. He was my mentor, my role model, and one of the only people in my life who truly understood me. He left behind a modest house in his will, and to my surprise, he left it to me. I knew it wasn't something that would make me rich, but it was sentimental. This was the house where I spent my summers with him, where I learned how to build things, and where I felt most at peace. Rachel, who had been mostly absent from our lives, suddenly reappeared when she heard about the inheritance. Apparently, she had fallen on hard times. She had a failed marriage, was struggling financially, and was couch surfing at friends' places. Our parents, who had never really gotten over her leaving, immediately jumped to her defense. They started pressuring me, saying that since I was doing fine, I have a stable job and an apartment, I should give the house to Rachel because she needs it more. I refused. Not because I don't sympathize with her situation, but because this house means something to me. I was the one who was there for our grandfather when his health declined. I was the one who visited him, took care of him, and made sure he was never alone. Rachel didn't even bother showing up for his funeral. She didn't call, didn't send a message, nothing. And now, she expects me to just hand over the house because she's struggling? Our parents were furious. They called me selfish, saying that family helps family and that I should put Rachel's needs first. When I pointed out that Rachel had cut herself off from the family for over a decade, they waved it off as youthful mistakes. They guilt-tripped me, saying that Rachel has nowhere else to go and that I should think about how much she's suffering. Rachel, for her part, didn't even try to act remorseful. She sent me a single text that read, "Hey, I heard about Grandpa's house. I really need a place right now, so can we talk about transferring it to me?" No apology for disappearing, no acknowledgement of our grandfather's death, just straight to asking for the house. I told her no, and she flipped. She started calling me selfish, saying that I was hoarding something that could help her rebuild her life. She even tried to say that Grandpa would have wanted her to have it because she was his first grandchild and the only girl. I knew that was a lie. Grandpa had made it clear that he was leaving the house to me for a reason. Things escalated when my parents threatened to cut contact with me if I didn't reconsider. They said that Rachel was trying to turn her life around and that I was being unnecessarily cruel by holding on to a house I didn't even need. They even offered to help cover legal fees to transfer the property to Rachel. I still refused. Now my parents aren't speaking to me, and Rachel has been bad-mouthing me to extended family. Some of my cousins have reached out, saying I should just let her have it to keep the peace. A few have taken my side, saying that Rachel is only coming around now that she wants something. At this point, I feel drained. I know I have every legal right to the house, and I know my grandfather wanted me to have it. But the constant pressure from my family is making me question myself. Am I really being selfish for holding on to something that means so much to me, even when my sister is struggling? AITA? AITA for not attending my sister's wedding after she humiliated me at my bridal shower. So this all started a few months ago when my younger sister, Emily, got engaged. I, 29F, have always been pretty close to Emily, 27F, even though we have our differences. But I was genuinely excited for her and thrilled to be the maid of honor at her wedding. I had already been through my own wedding a few years ago, and I thought it would be fun to return the favor by being there for her during this special time. At first, everything was going fine. We planned the bridal shower together, with me taking the lead since I had more experience with weddings. Emily was a bit more relaxed about things, which I thought was cute. I put together a guest list, arranged catering, and coordinated with the venue. As her maid of honor, I felt it was my job to make sure everything was perfect for her big day, just like she did for mine. About 2 weeks before the bridal shower, Emily mentioned to me that she wanted to have a game at the party. Now, we've all played those cheesy bridal shower games where you write down answers to questions about the bride and groom, or something like that. I wasn't really into it, but I didn't think it was a big deal. I figured it would just be a fun way to pass the time. But then Emily came up with this idea. She wanted to play a game where the guests would write down the most embarrassing thing they knew about me. She said it would be funny and everyone could laugh. She kept emphasizing how it would be lighthearted and all in good fun, so I reluctantly agreed. She assured me that no one would say anything that would cross the line. The day of the shower came, and everything was going smoothly at first. People were eating, chatting, and having a good time. Then came the game. I don't know why I was so nervous, but when it started, I was immediately uncomfortable. Some of the guests knew me well. Family members, old friends from high school, even some of Emily's friends who I'd met over the years. But no one, and I mean no one, warned me about what was about to happen. One by one, people started reading out their answers. At first, it was silly things, stories from high school, things I did in college that were kind of embarrassing. No big deal. But then came the next round. Someone I don't even know who read out something that made my stomach drop. It was a story about a time I had an embarrassing bathroom incident at a friend's wedding. Okay, sure, it was awkward, but I had gotten over it years ago. It wasn't something I would have wanted to relive in front of a crowd, but fine, I laughed it off. Then came another one, and another, and another. Each answer was more humiliating than the last. Someone mentioned a time I was drunk at a party and accidentally insulted someone I didn't even know. Another guest talked about an awkward breakup I had with my college boyfriend, where I cried in front of a bunch of people. I was sitting there, smiling, trying not to let anyone see how uncomfortable I was. But inside, I was dying. Every time someone spoke, I felt smaller and more exposed. I tried to look at Emily, hoping she'd see how upset I was and put a stop to it. But she was just sitting there laughing. She was clearly having fun, which only made me feel worse. At some point, I had enough. I got up and excused myself, saying I needed to use the restroom. I ran to the bathroom and just broke down in tears. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. I know people say that brides and bridesmaids are the focus at bridal showers, but I had never in my wildest dreams thought that my own sister would publicly humiliate me like that. After a few minutes, I pulled myself together and went back to the party. I didn't make a scene, but I quietly excused myself from the game and went to sit in a corner. When the shower was finally over, I didn't stick around for the after party. I left early and went home, and I didn't speak to Emily for the next few days. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or not, so I kept my feelings to myself for a while. But a few days later, Emily texted me asking why I had been so distant. I finally broke down and told her how hurt I was by the game, how embarrassed I felt, and how it made me question whether I even wanted to be part of the wedding anymore. Her response was not at all what I expected. She told me I was being too sensitive and that I needed to lighten up. She said it was just a game and that everyone was having fun. When I told her I didn't find it fun at all and that it made me feel like a joke, she called me dramatic and said I was ruining the mood. At this point, I felt like she wasn't even listening to me. She wasn't trying to understand how hurt I was. She was just brushing it off as me being overly emotional. I told her I didn't think I could be a part of her wedding anymore, and she got really upset. She said if I wasn't going to support her, then I should just stay home. She said she couldn't deal with someone who couldn't take a joke, and that if I was going to act this way, she'd rather I not be there at all. To be clear, I love my sister. We've had our fights over the years, but I never imagined something like this could happen. I thought that as her maid of honor, I'd be there for her in the best way possible. But now I'm questioning whether I made a mistake by agreeing to take on that role in the first place. Now, a few weeks before the wedding, I'm faced with the dilemma. Do I attend and act like everything is fine, or do I stick to my guns and stay away? I feel like Emily has crossed the line and doesn't understand the depth of what she did. I also feel like she's not respecting my feelings and is just brushing me off as if I don't matter. So, am I the asshole for not attending my sister's wedding after she humiliated me at my bridal shower? I'm torn between doing what's right for me and trying to salvage my relationship with her. AITA for refusing to let my brother move back into our childhood home, even though he's struggling? I, 33M, recently inherited my childhood home after my mother passed away last year. It's a modest but well-kept house in a quiet neighborhood. I never expected to own it, but my mother left it to me in her will, likely because I was the one who stayed close, helped take care of her in her later years, and maintained the property. I didn't ask for it. I was fully prepared for the house to be sold and split between my brother, Daniel, 35M, and me. But my mother made it clear that she wanted me to have it, and I respected her wishes. Daniel and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, he was the rebellious one, constantly getting into trouble, skipping school, and butting heads with our parents. Meanwhile, I was the boring younger brother who followed the rules, did well in school, and generally stayed out of trouble. Our parents weren't rich, but they worked hard to provide for us. Despite their best efforts, Daniel always seemed to feel like the world owed him something. When he turned 18, he took off, saying he was too big for this small-town life and that he was destined for something greater. He bounced around from job to job, always chasing some get-rich-quick scheme. He rarely kept in touch unless he needed something, usually money. My parents, especially my mother, never gave up on him. They sent him money when he needed it, helped him with rent, and even paid off some of his debts. Meanwhile, I was working my way through college and later building a stable career. About 6 years ago, Daniel called in a panic. He had gotten into some serious financial trouble, something about an investment scam gone wrong. My mother drained nearly half her savings to bail him out, and he promised he would pay her back one day. He never did. After that, he went mostly silent again until my mom got sick. When she was diagnosed with cancer, I stepped up to take care of her. I took her to her appointments, handled her finances, and made sure she was comfortable in her final months. Daniel? He barely called. He made vague promises to visit but never followed through. The few times he did reach out, it was always about how hard his life was, how he was struggling, how he wished he could be there but just couldn't afford the time off work. When she passed, he showed up at the funeral, gave a dramatic speech about how much he loved her, and then disappeared again. A few months later, the will was read, and I found out my mother had left the house to me. I was shocked. I had assumed it would be split between us. But the lawyer explained that she had made her decision based on who had been there for her and who would actually take care of the home. It was bittersweet. I loved that house, but I also felt guilty, knowing Daniel would probably be angry. Sure enough, as soon as he found out, he lost it. He called me furious, saying that I had stolen what was rightfully his. He claimed Mom had always promised the house would be for both of us. I reminded him that I hadn't asked for it and that this was Mom's decision, not mine. He didn't care. He ranted about how unfair it was and accused me of manipulating her while she was sick to cut him out. I told him if he had such a problem with it, he should have been around more. That was the last time we spoke, until last month. Daniel called me out of the blue, sounding desperate. He had lost his job, was going through a nasty breakup, and was basically homeless. He asked if he could stay at the house for a while until he got back on his feet. I knew immediately what that meant. He had no plan, no timeline, and no intention of leaving once he moved in. I told him no. I wasn't rude about it. I explained that I had spent the last year fixing up the house, making it my own, and that I didn't think it was a good idea. He immediately flipped, saying that I was a selfish bastard, that I had won the lottery with the house, and that it was disgusting that I wouldn't help my own brother when he was at rock bottom. He guilt-tripped me, saying that if Mom were alive, she'd be heartbroken to see me turn my back on family. I held firm. I told him that this house was my home now, that I had worked hard to maintain it, and that I wasn't going to let him move in just so I could watch him trash the place like he had with every other opportunity in his life. I even offered to help him find a short-term rental or loan him a little money to get back on his feet, but he refused. He said if he wasn't staying at the house, he didn't want my help at all. Since then, he's been trashing me to the rest of the family. A few aunts and uncles have reached out, saying that family helps family and that I should just let him stay for a bit. They don't know Daniel like I do. I know that if I let him in, he'll never leave. He'll make excuses, drag his feet, and then eventually start acting like he's entitled to the house altogether. Some of my cousins think I'm being harsh, saying that even though Daniel has made mistakes, he's still my brother and deserves another chance. A few friends have told me to stick to my boundaries, that I don't owe him anything, and that I should trust my gut. The guilt is starting to creep in, though. I can't help but wonder, am I being too cold? Am I really just punishing him for the past instead of giving him a real shot at turning things around? AITA for refusing to let my brother move back into our childhood home, even though he has nowhere else to go? AITA for not helping my brother pay for his wedding after he made my wedding about himself? This situation has been tearing me up, and I feel like I need some perspective on whether I'm overreacting. I, 30F, got married about a year ago, and my brother, Jake, 32M, is getting married next month. Our relationship has always been a bit complicated, but things really hit a boiling point around my wedding, and I'm still not sure if I'm wrong to be holding a grudge. So, let me start with my wedding. My husband and I have been engaged for about 2 years, and we've been planning a fairly small wedding. We wanted something intimate, meaningful, and low-key. We didn't have a huge budget, but we made it work by being resourceful and focusing on what really mattered to us. We invited close family and friends, including my brother, Jake. Now, Jake and I have always had a bit of sibling rivalry. He's the type of person who craves attention and seems to thrive in the spotlight, which has always clashed with my more reserved nature. He's also a bit of a show-off, and it's not uncommon for him to overshadow others unintentionally, or sometimes, I suspect, intentionally. Leading up to my wedding, I was stressed enough with all the planning, but there was one thing that was really starting to get under my skin, Jake. It started with little comments like, "I hope your wedding day isn't a disaster like mine would be," or "I can't believe you're doing it that way. Don't you want something bigger and more extravagant?" I brushed it off at first, thinking he was just trying to make small talk or be sarcastic. But then it escalated. About 2 weeks before my wedding, Jake casually mentioned that he was planning to wear a suit that was very similar to my husband's tuxedo. He said it would be funny and that he was thinking about making a grand entrance, something memorable for everyone to talk about. I immediately told him that wasn't a good idea, especially because we had a specific color scheme and my husband's outfit was already chosen. Jake seemed to take it in stride, but I could tell he was annoyed by my response. The day of my wedding was a whirlwind of emotions and last-minute details. When it came time for the ceremony, I walked down the aisle, feeling like everything was finally coming together. But as I got to the altar, I saw Jake, right there, front and center. He'd somehow managed to position himself in the spot reserved for the maid of honor. At first, I thought he was just standing in the wrong place by accident, but then he flashed me a grin and didn't move. My maid of honor had to step around him awkwardly, and the entire ceremony fell off. I tried to focus on the moment and let it slide, but it only got worse during the reception. Jake made multiple speeches, some about me, some about himself. He shared embarrassing childhood stories, tried to make everyone laugh at my expense, and even had the audacity to joke about how much better his wedding would be than mine when he eventually got married. He ended one of his toasts with, "When I get married, I'll definitely be the star of the show, just like I always am in our family." At that point, I was mortified. I'm not someone who loves being the center of attention, but my wedding was supposed to be about me and my husband, not about my brother's antics. It felt like the whole day was hijacked, and I couldn't enjoy it because of his constant need to make everything about him. The final straw was when, during our first dance, he interrupted us by shouting, "Hey, remember that time I caught you guys making out in the garage when you were 16? I was livid. It was an incredibly inappropriate moment to bring up that memory, and I snapped at him, telling him he needed to stop ruining my day. That night, when the event was over and most of the guests had left, Jake gave me a pat on the back and said, "Well, that wasn't as embarrassing as I thought it'd be. But hey, it's your day." I couldn't even respond. I was too drained from everything that had happened. I didn't bring it up to him at the time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he had completely ruined my wedding. My husband, of course, was upset too. And after some discussion, we both agreed that we wouldn't let this happen again in the future. But that's where the story really gets complicated. A few months ago, Jake got engaged. Naturally, I expected to be included in the wedding planning, and I offered to help him with any details. But when I asked if he needed any assistance, he responded with, "Oh, don't worry, I've got this. You probably won't be able to help anyway, since you'll be busy with your own life." It struck me as a bit dismissive, but I didn't let it bother me too much. I assumed he was just being his usual self. Then, things took another turn. A few weeks ago, Jake asked if I would help him pay for his wedding. He said he was a little short on funds and could really use the help, since his fiancée's family wasn't contributing much. When I asked for more details, he said he needed money for the reception venue, as it was more expensive than he originally thought. I was surprised, but I didn't want to say no outright. I've always helped out my family when I can, so I told him I'd think about it. But then I remembered how he treated my wedding, the way he made everything about him, how he took the spotlight on what was supposed to be my special day, and how he acted like I was being dramatic when I confronted him about it. I realized I wasn't ready to just hand over money without some kind of acknowledgement from him that what he did was wrong. So, I sat on it for a few days, trying to figure out if I should even bring it up or if I should just let him go on with his wedding plans. Finally, I sent him a message explaining how I felt. I told him that I couldn't justify helping him pay for his wedding when he had so clearly undermined me and my own special day. I reminded him of how he hijacked my wedding and made it all about himself. I also mentioned that it seemed like he didn't even consider how hurt I was by his behavior, and that I wasn't sure if I could support him financially after everything that had happened. Jake's response was, well, less than gracious. He told me I was being petty, that I needed to let it go, and that I was just jealous of his wedding. He said, "You've had your day in the spotlight. It's my turn now. If you can't help me out, then that's on you." He even threw in that I should be more supportive of family and that I was making everything about myself, just like I always do. I was stunned. I never expected him to respond like that. I thought we could at least have a mature conversation about what had happened and why I was hesitant to help him. But now I'm wondering if I really was wrong to feel this way. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to help my brother pay for his wedding after everything that happened at mine? Am I being unreasonable by holding on to this resentment? Or should I have just let it go and helped him out? AITA for kicking my roommate out after he secretly let his brother move in? I, 27M, have been living with my roommate, Jake, 28M, for about 3 years. We were never best friends, but we got along well enough and respected each other's space. We split rent and bills evenly, kept common areas clean, and had a pretty solid arrangement. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, while Jake has a job that requires him to be out of the apartment most of the day. For the most part, our living situation was smooth until about 4 months ago, when Jake's younger brother, Ryan, 23M, suddenly started showing up at our place more and more often. I didn't think much of it at first. Family visits happened, but over time, it became clear that Ryan wasn't just visiting. He was staying overnight regularly, eating our food, and using our shower without asking. At first, I tried to be patient. I asked Jake if Ryan was going through something and needed a place to crash temporarily. Jake just shrugged it off and said Ryan was figuring things out and needed some space. I took that as a hint that something was going on, so I let it slide. But then it got worse. Ryan was always home. He would sit on the couch all day watching TV, leaving dishes in the sink, and generally making a mess. I started noticing my groceries disappearing at a much faster rate. And whenever I brought it up to Jake, he would give me some excuse about how Ryan must have forgotten to ask before taking something. One day, I came home from running errands and found Ryan in my room, using my desk setup to play video games. My laptop was open, my work papers had been shoved aside, and he had a drink sitting next to my expensive drawing tablet. I was livid. I told him immediately to get out of my room, and he acted like I was the one overreacting. "Relax, dude. I was just borrowing your chair," he said. I confronted Jake that night and told him Ryan had to go. He wasn't paying rent, wasn't contributing to anything, and was clearly crossing boundaries. Jake sighed and said he meant to talk to me about it, but Ryan had nowhere else to go and just needed a little more time. I asked how much time we were talking about, and he got defensive, saying I needed to be more understanding. I wasn't having it. I told Jake that if Ryan was going to stay, he needed to pay rent and contribute to bills. Jake said Ryan was broke and trying to get back on his feet. I countered that this wasn't my problem and that I wasn't running a charity. Jake promised he'd talk to Ryan, but nothing changed. Over the next few weeks, Ryan continued to act like he lived there. He would come in late at night, making noise while I was trying to sleep. He invited his friends over without asking, and they would be loud in the living room while I was working. I even found one of his friends drinking my beer without permission. Then came the final straw. I woke up one morning and went to take a shower, only to find that my towel was wet and my shampoo bottle was half empty. I knew immediately that Ryan had used my stuff without asking. Furious, I knocked on Jake's door and demanded an explanation. Jake admitted that Ryan had been using my toiletries because he didn't have any of his own and was too embarrassed to ask. That was it. I told Jake that Ryan had to leave by the end of the week or I was going to start looking for a new place myself. Jake got mad, saying I was being unreasonable and that I should have a little empathy. I told him empathy went out the window when his brother started treating my personal space like it was his. Jake didn't take me seriously, but I meant it. When the end of the week came and Ryan was still there, I went to our landlord. I explained the situation, and since Ryan wasn't on the lease, the landlord agreed with me. Ryan had no right to be there. I came home that day and told Ryan directly that he had 24 hours to leave. He tried to argue, but I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. Jake was pissed, saying I had blindsided them and that I was putting his brother on the street. I reminded him that I gave him plenty of chances to handle this differently. The next day, Ryan packed up his stuff and left. Jake barely spoke to me for the next week, and then told me he was moving out because he couldn't trust me anymore. I said, "That's your choice," and left it at that. Now, some mutual friends are saying I was too harsh and that I should have handled it with more patience. They claim Jake was just trying to help his brother and that I should have been more flexible. But as far as I'm concerned, I gave them plenty of warnings. So, AITA for kicking Ryan out and essentially forcing Jake to move out as well? AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with me after she criticized my parenting in front of my kids? So, I need some perspective on this situation because my husband and I are genuinely at odds about it. I, 34F, am married to Ben, 36M, and we have 3 kids, Lily, 8F, Ethan, 5M, and Sophie, 3F. Our family is generally pretty close-knit, but lately, things have become tense because of my sister-in-law, Claire, 32F. It all started a few months ago when Claire came to visit us for a weekend. Ben and I both agreed it would be nice to have her stay with us, as she was going through a tough time with her job and wanted a change of scenery. Claire has always been a bit opinionated. She has no kids of her own and often likes to offer unsolicited advice on parenting. It's something that I've tolerated for the most part because in the past, I figured she was just being a bit overly enthusiastic about things she didn't fully understand. But it wasn't until this particular weekend that things took a turn for the worse. At first, the weekend was fine. We did a few activities together, went out for lunch, and had some nice family time. But as the weekend went on, Claire started commenting more and more on how we were raising our children. She'd make little comments like, "Don't you think Lily is getting a little old for that type of toy?" Or, "Sophie really shouldn't be eating that many sweets, don't you think?" I didn't say much in response. I figured I'd let it slide and move on because, family. But then things took a much bigger turn. On the second night of her stay, we were all sitting in the living room, and I was giving the kids their bedtime routine. Lily was getting ready for bed, and Ethan was playing quietly on the floor while Sophie was getting her milk. That's when Claire started making comments that really threw me off. She turned to Ben and me and said, "You really spoil the kids. I mean, all of them are so dependent on you for everything. They can't even sit down at the dinner table without making a huge mess. And you're giving Sophie milk? She's 3. She should be drinking from a cup by now, not a bottle." At that moment, I felt a mix of frustration and embarrassment. I tried to brush it off and calmly said, "Claire, I don't think it's really any of your business how we parent our kids. We're doing what works for us, and we're comfortable with it." But But she didn't stop there. Instead of taking the hint, she doubled down, saying, "Well, that's part of the problem. You're too comfortable with bad habits. No one of the kids are so needy. I mean, look at Lily. She's 8 years old and still needs so much attention. Don't you want her to be more independent?" I was starting to get upset now, but I still tried to keep my cool. I told her, "Claire, every family is different. We're not looking for your approval. And if you don't have anything nice or helpful to say, it might be best if we end this conversation." But she kept pushing. "I'm just trying to help," she said. "I mean, you really should be preparing them for life outside of this house. You're not doing them any favors by coddling them. I'm just giving you some tough love." That's when my blood started to boil. I'm usually a calm person, but the idea of someone without kids telling me how to raise my kids really rubbed me the wrong way. I turned to her and said, "I appreciate your concern, but I really don't need parenting advice from someone who hasn't been in my shoes. I think we got it covered." But she wasn't done. She turned to Ben and said, "I don't know how you put up with this. I mean, we're all family here, but come on. You've got to admit she's being a little overprotective. I've seen how much Ben has to do around here, and he's always picking up the slack when she doesn't want to deal with the kids." Ben, who had been quiet up until this point, finally spoke up, saying, "Claire, I don't think this is the right time for this conversation. Let's just drop it." But Claire didn't back down. "No, seriously, I'm just being honest. You can't keep babying them like this, Ben. It's not healthy for them, and it's not healthy for you." I was furious at this point. I stood up, told Claire that she was being rude and completely disrespectful to me as a parent, and that she was no longer welcome to stay with us. I told her I wasn't going to have her criticize my parenting in front of my children, and that I would appreciate it if she left. She was shocked and tried to defend herself, saying that I was being overdramatic and that she was just trying to help. But I told her that I wasn't interested in any more help from her and that she needed to leave immediately. She packed her things and left that night. The next day, Ben was extremely upset with me. He said I overreacted, that Claire didn't mean any harm, and that I could have handled the situation more calmly. He also said that I made the family dynamics awkward and that now Claire was upset and felt unwelcome. I told him that I didn't care if she was upset because she had disrespected me in my own home and in front of my children, and I wouldn't stand for it. Ben told me I was being too rigid and that I should have let things go. Now, things are really tense between me and Ben. He thinks I should apologize to Claire and that I overreacted, but I feel like I was completely justified. I think Ben's not seeing the bigger picture, that by letting Claire criticize me like that, I'm setting a precedent for how people treat me and my family. I don't want anyone coming into my home and making me feel like I'm not doing a good job as a mom. To make things more complicated, Ben is now saying that Claire is upset and won't come around for family events if I don't apologize, and that it's causing unnecessary drama. I don't want to cause rifts in the family, but at the same time, I feel like standing my ground is important. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law stay with me after she criticized my parenting in front of my kids? Am I being unreasonable for not apologizing and holding firm on my decision? I honestly feel like I did the right thing, but I'm starting to second-guess myself after all the pressure from Ben. AITA for refusing to help my estranged father after he spent years treating me like a backup plan? I, 31M, grew up with a father who made it clear that I was never his priority. My parents divorced when I was 7, and my dad quickly remarried a woman named Lisa, who had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Chris, now 34M, and Megan, now 32F. From the moment Lisa and her kids entered the picture, I became an afterthought. When I was younger, I tried to be part of his new family. I wanted to be included in their vacations, their weekend outings, and their family game nights. But every time I showed up, it was clear I was an outsider. Chris and Megan called my dad Dad, and he treated them as if they were his own, while I was the awkward visitor he had to entertain every other weekend. As I got older, things got worse. My dad started canceling visitations more often, always with an excuse. Chris had a soccer tournament. Megan had a recital. Lisa had planned a family trip. Meanwhile, I spent most of my weekends at my mom's, watching from the sidelines as my dad built a perfect little family that didn't include me. By the time I was a teenager, I had given up trying. I stopped reaching out, and my dad never seemed to notice. When I graduated high school, he didn't show up. He sent a half-hearted text saying he was proud of me, but was busy with something important. That something important turned out to be Chris's college orientation. I went to college on my own, working part-time jobs and taking out loans. My mom did what she could, but money was tight, and my dad never once offered to help. Meanwhile, he fully funded Chris's and Megan's educations, bought them cars, and even helped Chris buy his first house. I stopped talking to him altogether by the time I was 22. He never reached out, and I accepted that I simply wasn't part of his life. That brings us to now. A few months ago, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my dad. He sounded weak and tired, and after some small talk, he told me he was sick, very sick. He had been diagnosed with a chronic illness that made it difficult for him to work, and he was struggling financially. He told me that Chris and Megan were too busy with their own lives to help, and that he really needed family support. I was floored. This man, who had ignored me for years, who had chosen his stepkids over me in every possible way, was suddenly calling me because he needed something. I asked him point blank why he was reaching out to me when his real family wasn't stepping up. He got quiet for a moment before saying, "I know I made mistakes, but at the end of the day, you're still my son." That set me off. I told him that he made it clear a long time ago that I was nothing more than an afterthought to him. I reminded him of all the times he ditched me, ignored me, and chose Chris and Megan over me. I told him that he had years to be my father, and he only cared now because he had nowhere else to turn. He started crying, saying he regretted everything and that he just needed a little help, just a little financial support to get him through the next few months. I told him no. The conversation ended with him calling me cruel and saying he never thought his own son would abandon him in his time of need. I hung up and haven't spoken to him since. Now, family members on his side have been reaching out, saying I should be the bigger person and that holding grudges won't bring back lost time. They say that no matter what happened in the past, he's still my father, and I should help him. I don't see it that way. In my mind, he abandoned me first. He had a chance to be my father, and he chose not to. He can't suddenly decide I'm his son again just because he needs money. So, AITA for refusing to help him now that he's struggling? AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her wedding after she went behind my back and asked my ex to be a groomsman? So I, 29F, have been struggling with whether I am in the wrong here or not. My sister, 31F, is getting married in a few months, and I'm at my wit's end with the situation. To give you some context, my sister and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, while I was constantly overlooked. I've come to terms with that over the years, but it's still been a source of tension between us. The thing that really complicates everything is that I have a very tumultuous history with her fiancé, Matt, 34M. We've never been close, but it all went south about a year ago when Matt and I broke up after a very messy and painful relationship. We had been together for 3 years, and it ended on horrible terms, lots of emotional manipulation, trust issues, and, to top it off, Matt had cheated on me. It was a devastating breakup, but I've done a lot of work to move past it. I've been in therapy, and I've slowly started dating again, and I feel like I've healed for the most part. Here's where it gets tricky. My sister and Matt's relationship has only gotten more serious since the breakup. They got engaged about 6 months ago, and while I've been cordial with both of them, I have not been thrilled about the situation. The thing is, my sister, despite knowing the full history between Matt and me, has continued to maintain a very close relationship with him. I'm not saying she's done anything malicious, but it's clear she's chosen Matt over me in several ways, and that hasn't been easy for me to swallow. We've had some difficult conversations over the past year, especially when I expressed my discomfort with her continuing to be so close with Matt, given our past. She told me that she didn't want to choose sides, and I respect that to a point, but it still stings every time they both come to family events together, acting like everything is fine when I'm still struggling with the past. Despite all this, I try to keep the peace for the sake of family, even though my feelings have been hurt. Now let me get to the wedding issue. A couple of weeks ago, my sister came to me with an odd request. She told me that she had already picked out her bridal party and was getting everything arranged. She then asked me if I could help with some of the wedding expenses, specifically for the dress she wanted me to wear. I've never been asked to help with wedding costs before, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Given the history between Matt and me, I wasn't thrilled about playing a significant role in the wedding. However, I knew my sister was asking me because she genuinely needed help, and I didn't want to disappoint her, so I agreed to help with the dress. Fast forward a few days, and I found out from a mutual friend that my sister had gone behind my back and invited Matt to be one of her groomsmen. Yes, you read that correctly. She invited my ex to be a part of her wedding party, despite knowing the huge emotional toll it would take on me. She didn't ask me if I was okay with it or even give me a heads up. She just decided to make that call without considering my feelings. I confronted my sister immediately. I asked her why on earth she would do something like that without talking to me first. She told me that she had to do what felt right for her, and that Matt had been an important part of her life for years now. She said that she understood it might be uncomfortable for me, but that she didn't want to be the bad guy by excluding him. I told her that I thought it was incredibly inconsiderate and hurtful. She tried to downplay it by saying that I could just avoid him if it made me uncomfortable, but she wasn't budging on the decision. At this point, I was incredibly hurt. Not only did she not consult me about inviting my ex to her wedding, but she also seemed to think I would just get over it and attend the wedding as if nothing had happened. My sister's response made me feel like my feelings didn't matter at all. I told her I wasn't going to attend her wedding if Matt was part of the wedding party, and I also told her that I wouldn't be helping with any more wedding expenses, including the dress. I said I didn't want to be a part of something that would make me feel like an outsider in my own family. She was furious. She called me selfish and told me that I was trying to ruin her big day. She even said that I was making her wedding all about me, which I thought was extremely unfair. She said that I needed to let go of the past and stop holding on to my issues with Matt. She told me that if I didn't get over it, I wouldn't be part of the family going forward. I was stunned by how little empathy she showed for how much pain this situation was causing me. I haven't spoken to my sister since that conversation. I feel betrayed by her, and I'm struggling to understand how she could disregard my feelings so easily. My husband, 34M, agrees with me that what my sister did was out of line, but he also feels that I should consider the long-term consequences of not attending the wedding. He says that we might be creating an unnecessary rift in the family, and that I should try to make peace with it for the sake of our relationship with my parents, who are also upset by the tension between me and my sister. The rest of my family has been divided. Some members think I'm in the right and are really supportive of my decision to stand my ground, while others think I should let it go and go to the wedding for the sake of family unity. It's been an incredibly stressful time, and I feel like no matter what I do, someone is going to be upset with me. Now I'm wondering if I'm really being unreasonable here. Am I wrong for refusing to attend the wedding or help with the expenses because my ex is part of the wedding party? Am I letting my past with Matt cloud my judgment? Or is my sister being completely disrespectful of my boundaries? AITA for refusing to help pay for my sister's wedding after she invited my ex to be a groomsman? AITA for refusing to let my friend stay with me after he got evicted, even though I could easily afford it? I, 32M, have always been careful with money. I grew up in a household where financial security was never guaranteed. So from a young age, I made it a priority to save, invest, and plan for my future. Now, after years of hard work, I own my own home, have a well-paying job, and live comfortably. I wouldn't say I'm rich, but I'm doing well. My friend, Nate, 33M, is the complete opposite. We met in college and became close despite our differences. Nate was the type of guy who lived in the moment, always chasing experiences, splurging on things he couldn't afford, and dismissing any talk of saving as boring or something to worry about later. When we graduated, I got a steady job and focused on building my career, while Nate bounced around from one gig to another, always chasing the next exciting opportunity. For years, I watched him make bad financial decisions. He leased expensive cars, lived in high-end apartments, and took vacations he couldn't afford. Whenever I tried to talk to him about budgeting or saving, he would brush it off, saying, "Money always comes back," or "I'd rather enjoy life than stress about numbers." This all came to a head a few months ago when Nate got evicted from his apartment. He had been struggling to keep up with rent, maxed out his credit cards, and had no savings to fall back on. He reached out to me, asking if he could crash at my place for a little while until he got back on his feet. Here's the thing, I could have let him stay, I have a guest room. I have more than enough money to cover extra expenses. It wouldn't have hurt me financially. But I knew Nate. I knew that a little while would turn into months, and that months could turn into a year. I knew that once he got comfortable, he would start making excuses for why he couldn't leave yet. I had seen him do this before with other people, staying rent-free while promising to pay them back, only to leave them hanging. So I told him no. I explained that I didn't think it was a good idea. I said that while I sympathized with his situation, I wasn't comfortable letting him move in. Instead, I offered to help him find an affordable place or even lend him some money for a deposit on a cheaper apartment. Nate was furious. He accused me of being selfish, saying that I was his best friend and that I had the means to help him, but was choosing not to. He said I was acting like a heartless landlord instead of a friend. When I pointed out that he had never taken financial responsibility seriously and that I wasn't going to enable his bad decisions, he blew up. He called me a hypocrite, saying that since I had been so careful with my money, I was in a position to help because of my privilege, and that refusing to do so was cruel. I stood my ground. I told him I wasn't going to let him make his problem my problem. He stormed out, and we haven't spoken since. Since then, mutual friends have weighed in, and opinions are split. Some agree with me, saying that Nate made his own bed and needs to figure this out himself. Others think I was too harsh, arguing that if I had the ability to help a friend in need, I should have. So, AITA for refusing to let Nate stay with me, even though I could have easily afforded it? AITA for refusing to let my parents attend my wedding after they kicked my fiancé out of their house. I, 28F, am getting married in a few months to my fiancé, Tom, 30M, and I'm starting to wonder if I've made a huge mistake in how I've been handling things with my parents. The situation with them has been tense for a while now, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if I'm justified in what I'm doing. This has gotten really messy, and I'm feeling a lot of pressure from both sides. A little background: my parents, Janet, 55F, and Greg, 58M, are generally good people, but they've never really liked Tom. They don't think he's good enough for me. It's not like he's done anything wrong. He's kind, caring, and hardworking, but my parents have always found some excuse not to like him. When we first started dating, they said he was too quiet, then it was too distant, and then it became he's not ambitious enough. The criticism has never stopped, but it's been something I've just learned to deal with, especially because I love Tom and we have a really strong relationship. Over the past few years, I've tried to make peace with their constant judgment. They're not exactly rude to him, but it's clear that they don't approve. They've never made an effort to get to know him the way I would have liked them to, and I've always felt that was a major source of tension between us. But it reached a breaking point last summer. Tom and I were visiting my parents for a long weekend, and everything seemed fine at first. It was just the usual stuff: awkward small talk, eating dinner together, me trying to keep things civil between Tom and my parents. But one night after dinner, Tom and I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood to clear our heads. We were gone for maybe an hour, and when we came back, my parents were in a full-on argument in the living room. I didn't know what happened, but I quickly realized it was about us. Apparently, while we were out, my parents had gone through Tom's bag while he wasn't around. I still can't believe this part, and found some personal things that they didn't approve of. They accused Tom of being immature for not being settled down yet, and they got on his case about his job situation. He had been going through a career transition at the time. They were upset that he wasn't serious enough about our future and that he didn't have a clear 5-year plan like they expected. It was honestly pretty infuriating to hear. They had no right to go through his things, and they completely overstepped. Tom understandably got upset. He asked them to apologize, and when they refused, he decided it was best to leave and drive back to his apartment. The situation was horrible, and my parents made it even worse by treating Tom like he was in the wrong. They told me I was being too sensitive and that he wasn't mature enough to handle adult conversations. I was furious, but I also felt like I had to choose between my family and my fiancé in that moment. I tried to smooth things over afterward, but it only made everything worse. Tom didn't want to speak to my parents at all, and I didn't blame him. They had humiliated him and made him feel like he wasn't good enough. I knew that my relationship with them had been strained for a while, but I had never imagined it would escalate like this. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, when we were planning our wedding. My parents, despite everything that had happened, started pressuring me to invite them to the wedding. I was hesitant. I wasn't sure if I could trust them to behave themselves, especially after how badly they treated Tom. I tried to talk to them about it, but my mom just kept saying, "You can't let this ruin your big day, honey. We're family, and we want to be there for you." I felt conflicted. I wanted my parents to be there, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that it would be a massive risk. I started talking to Tom about it, and he was clear. He didn't want them at the wedding unless they sincerely apologized for what had happened. He felt like they needed to show some real remorse for how they treated him, especially considering that it was supposed to be a day about us and our relationship, not about their judgment of him. He told me he didn't want them there unless they made an effort to treat him with respect. It was a tough decision, but I agreed with him. I was done with them treating him like second class, and I didn't want to feel like I was choosing them over him. So, I did what I thought was right and told my parents that, unless they apologized, I wasn't comfortable having them at the wedding. I explained how much their treatment of Tom hurt both of us, and how important it was for me that they showed some kind of acknowledgement of that. I wasn't asking for a huge public display of affection or anything, just a sincere apology for what happened and a promise to respect Tom as a person. My parents were absolutely furious when I told them. They said I was being unreasonable and that I was letting some guy dictate my relationship with them. They told me that family was supposed to come before everything else, and I was being selfish for not putting them first. My mom was especially hurt, saying, "This is your wedding, and you're letting him drive a wedge between us." She even said that I was ruining the family over something so insignificant. I've been feeling so conflicted about this. On the one hand, I understand that family is important, and I really want my parents at my wedding. But on the other hand, I've made it clear that Tom and I are a package deal. I can't sit there on my wedding day, surrounded by people who don't respect my partner. I feel like I've already compromised so much over the years for the sake of my family, and I can't keep doing that when it comes to the most important day of my life. Since then, things have been awkward. My parents have told me that I'm being dramatic and that I'm letting my relationship with Tom ruin my relationship with them. They've threatened not to come at all unless I get my priorities straight. They've made it clear they expect me to choose them over Tom, and I'm really struggling with what to do. I've had to face the reality that this might be the breaking point in my relationship with them, but I don't want to cause drama or make things harder than they need to be. So, Reddit. AITA for refusing to let my parents attend my wedding after they kicked Tom out of their house. Am I being unreasonable for holding my ground on this? Or am I just being too hard on my family? AITA for refusing to take my nephew in after my sister demanded I step up as family. I, 35M, have always had a complicated relationship with my sister, Sarah, 38F. Growing up, she was the golden child. Our parents doted on her, gave her whatever she wanted, and made countless excuses for her behavior. I, on the other hand, was expected to be responsible, independent, and self-sufficient from a young age. Sarah was always reckless. She was the type to jump from one thing to the next without thinking about the consequences. She dropped out of college, moved in with a series of boyfriends who all mysteriously ruined her life, and had a habit of quitting jobs on impulse because they were too demanding. Meanwhile, I worked my way through school, built a stable career in finance, and was able to buy a house by the time I was 30. Sarah had my nephew, Jake, now 12M, when she was 26. The father was out of the picture before Jake was even born, and Sarah has struggled to keep things together ever since. My parents helped her financially for years, paying her rent, covering her bills, and even giving her money just in case. Anytime I suggested that Sarah needed to take more responsibility for herself, I was told to be supportive and understand that not everyone is as lucky as I was. A year ago, both of our parents passed away within months of each other. It was devastating, but it also meant that the safety net Sarah had relied on was gone. She quickly burned through whatever inheritance she received, somehow spending thousands of dollars within 6 months, and then called me in tears, saying she was going to be evicted. She begged me to lend her money, swearing she would pay me back as soon as she got back on her feet. I told her no. I reminded her that she had received just as much inheritance as I did, and if she had managed it wisely, she wouldn't be in this position. She accused me of being cold-hearted and obsessed with money, saying I was selfish for not helping my own sister. I held my ground. A few weeks ago, things escalated. Sarah showed up at my house unannounced, with Jake in tow, looking exhausted and desperate. She told me she had officially been evicted and had nowhere to go. Then, she dropped the bombshell. She expected me to take Jake in while she figured things out. I was stunned. Not once had she even asked if I would take him. She just assumed that, because I had a stable home and income, I would step in and take responsibility. When I hesitated, she immediately went on the attack, accusing me of being a terrible uncle and saying that family takes care of family. I asked her what her actual plan was. Where was she going to go? How long was this supposed to last? And what exactly was she doing to fix the situation? She got defensive and said I was overcomplicating things and that she just needed me to do the right thing. She had no real answers, no plan, and no job lined up. She just wanted to dump Jake on me and disappear until she sorted her mess out. I told her no. I said that while I love my nephew, it was her responsibility to provide for him, not mine. I pointed out that I wasn't a parent and had never signed up to raise a child. She screamed at me, saying I was a heartless bastard who was abandoning her son in his time of need. I told her she needed to find an actual solution instead of expecting other people to fix her life for her. She left, cursing me out, and later sent a series of messages calling me a selfish piece of sh*t and saying she would never forgive me for turning my back on Jake. Now other family members are reaching out, telling me I should have at least taken him in temporarily. Some have even suggested I should consider adopting him, given that Sarah is clearly not in a place to be a good mother. I feel awful for Jake. None of this is his fault. But at the same time, I am not his father. I didn't create this situation, and I don't think it's fair that I'm expected to sacrifice my life because of Sarah's poor decisions. So, AITA for refusing to take my nephew in, even though I know he's in a bad situation. AITA for refusing to go to my sister's wedding because she is marrying a guy who cheated on me. So, I'm in a bit of a weird situation, and I'm honestly torn. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Megan, 27F, who is getting married to a guy, Chris, 29M. The problem is, I'm struggling to even be happy for her, and it's all because of Chris. Let me give some background. About 5 years ago, Chris and I briefly dated. It was nothing serious. We had been casually seeing each other for a few months. There was no huge commitment, but it was definitely a relationship I thought was heading somewhere. We met through some mutual friends, and honestly, I was excited about it at the time. Then one day, I found out through a friend that Chris had been seeing someone else the entire time we were dating. I was devastated. I confronted him, and he admitted that he had cheated on me. But he also said it wasn't a big deal and that he wasn't looking for anything serious. This was such a slap in the face. I felt completely disrespected. I ended things immediately, but that wasn't the end of it. Here's where it gets even worse. Megan and Chris knew each other before he and I started dating, but they were never really close. After I broke up with him, Megan reached out to me and said she was sorry for what happened, and I appreciated that at the time. She even told me that she understood if I didn't want her to hang out with him anymore because of how things ended. I thought that was fair enough, and I didn't hold it against her at all. But fast forward to a year later. Megan and Chris started getting closer. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I didn't want to be that person who tried to control who my sister hung out with. So, I kept my mouth shut. Over time, they started dating. I didn't love the idea of her being with someone who had hurt me, but I didn't want to make things awkward, so I went along with it. I tried to be supportive of their relationship. After all, I wanted my sister to be happy, and I figured she knew what she was doing. But as their relationship progressed, I started seeing more and more signs of red flags. For one, Chris was never truly apologetic for what happened between us. I didn't expect him to beg for forgiveness, but the fact that he never acknowledged how he hurt me or even tried to make things right felt like a huge slap in the face. Then there was the fact that whenever Megan and I would hang out, Chris would often be there, and I was always expected to just act like everything was fine. Whenever the topic of our past came up, he would just brush it off, making it clear he didn't care about how I felt. It was like he just wanted to pretend that the whole cheating incident never happened. Megan, on the other hand, kept defending him and saying he's changed, or he's not the same person he was back then. I just didn't buy it. This all came to a head when Chris proposed to Megan. They had been dating for about 3 years at that point, and I was honestly shocked. I didn't think it would last, and I didn't think I could ever support their relationship. But Megan was over the moon, and she asked me to be her maid of honor. I was torn. I love my sister, and I didn't want to ruin her special moment. But I also knew I couldn't stand by her side, knowing she was marrying someone who had disrespected me so deeply. I had a long conversation with Megan about how I felt. I told her that I had a hard time being happy for her, given how Chris had treated me. I explained that I didn't think he had changed, and I couldn't pretend like everything was okay when I still felt hurt by what had happened. I told her I wasn't comfortable being in the wedding at all, and I didn't know if I could even attend. Megan was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was trying to make her choose between me and her fiancé. She told me that I was ruining her happiness and making everything about me. She said I needed to get over it and move on because I explained that it wasn't about me trying to control her life. It was about my own feelings and boundaries. But she didn't seem to care. She called me petty and immature, saying that I was holding on to something that happened years ago and that I was being ridiculous by not supporting her. I still didn't know what to do, so I reached out to my parents for advice. They both told me I was being unreasonable and that I should put my feelings aside for the sake of family. They said that I couldn't let something that happened years ago ruin my sister's wedding. They argued that Chris had probably changed, and I should give him a second chance, even if I didn't like the idea of him being with Megan. My mom even went as far as to say that if I didn't support my sister's wedding, I might lose her for good. That hit me hard. I didn't want to lose my sister, but I also didn't want to compromise my own feelings. I felt stuck in the middle of everything. If I went to the wedding, I would be pretending to be okay with something I wasn't okay with. But if I didn't go, I might lose my relationship with Megan entirely. I ended up texting Megan and telling her that I couldn't be part of the wedding. I said that I couldn't pretend to be okay with Chris being in the picture, and I didn't want to cause drama on her special day. I told her that if she really wanted me to be there, she needed to acknowledge how much it hurt me that she was marrying the guy who cheated on me, and that he never truly apologized for what he did. She didn't take that well. She said I was being a terrible sister and that I was making her feel like her love life wasn't good enough for me. She told me that she didn't need my negativity at her wedding and that she didn't want me to come if I couldn't be happy for her. It's been a few weeks since that conversation, and I'm still feeling the fallout. Megan is refusing to speak to me, and my parents are upset with me for causing so much drama. I'm feeling incredibly torn. On the one hand, I love my sister, and I don't want to lose her. On the other hand, I feel like I can't just pretend like everything is fine when I still feel hurt by Chris and the way he treated me. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to go to my sister's wedding because she is marrying a guy who cheated on me? I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable or if my feelings are valid. AITA for calling my parents out for financially supporting my brother after he lost his job and then refusing to pay my rent when I lost mine. So, this is a bit of a long story, but I need to know if I'm in the wrong here because I've been getting a lot of mixed reactions, and I'm feeling frustrated and confused. I, 26F, have a younger brother, Eric, 24M, and we've always had a somewhat competitive relationship growing up. Our parents have always been very involved in our lives, and while they're not overbearing, they tend to favor Eric in some ways because he's the youngest, and for whatever reason, they've always been more lenient with him. The issue started a few months ago when Eric lost his job. He was working in retail management, and while it wasn't a glamorous job, it was stable. Unfortunately, his store closed down due to economic issues, and he was laid off. At first, he was really upset and went through the usual period of denial and frustration, but what struck me was how much my parents stepped in to help him. They immediately began paying for his rent, car payment, and even covering some of his living expenses. I'm not saying he didn't need help. I understand that he had just lost his income, but it felt like they were really going above and beyond for him. Now, my situation is a little different. I've been living on my own for a few years, working in a job I really enjoy. I'm a marketing assistant for a small tech company, and while it's not the highest paying job, I've been able to manage. However, the company I work for has been struggling financially for a while now, and a few weeks ago, they laid off a significant portion of the staff. Unfortunately, I was one of the people let go. To make matters worse, I had just signed a 1-year lease for my apartment a couple of months before, and I was left in a really tough spot. I didn't have the savings to cover a prolonged job search, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to make rent in a few months if I didn't find a new job soon. Naturally, I turned to my parents for help. I had always been somewhat independent, so asking for financial help felt like a big deal for me, but I was desperate. I called them up and explained the situation. I told them I was actively looking for a new job, but with the way the economy was right now, I wasn't sure how long it would take to find something. I asked if they could help me out with my rent for the next couple of months while I searched for a new job. At first, they seemed sympathetic. They told me they understood how tough things were right now and that they'd think about it. However, when I followed up a week later, I was hit with a response I wasn't expecting. My mom told me that they couldn't help me out financially because I needed to learn how to be responsible and how to manage my own finances. She said that they had already been helping Eric with his rent and that they had already given him a lot of support, and they didn't think it was fair to do the same for me. I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything my brother had gone through and all the help they had given him, I was now being told that I didn't deserve the same level of support. I tried to explain that my situation was different, that I was actively looking for work, and that I had no safety net. But my parents didn't budge. They kept saying I needed to be more responsible and figure things out on my own, even though I was telling them how dire my situation was. They said they would always love me, but they weren't going to bail me out financially. I was furious. I felt like I had always been the responsible one, doing everything by the book, and yet here I was struggling to make ends meet, and my parents were refusing to help me. Meanwhile, they were paying for Eric's rent and basically keeping him afloat without question. I didn't know what to do, so I vented to some friends about it, and they were all pretty shocked by how unfair it seemed. That's when I decided to confront my parents. I wasn't going to let it slide, and I felt like I needed to speak up. I called them and said, "I don't understand why you're helping Eric, but not me. We're both your children, and I don't see why I'm being treated differently just because I've been able to manage on my own for a while." My mom got defensive and said that Eric was in a tougher spot and that he needed more support right now. She said that I had always been able to take care of myself, so she didn't see why I couldn't figure things out now. My dad chimed in, saying, "Life's tough, and you'll figure it out. You have a good work ethic. You'll get back on your feet." The more they spoke, the angrier I got. I said, "You're treating me like I'm some kind of failure, and you're acting like Eric's problems are somehow more important than mine. How is it that he gets all this help, but I'm not even worthy of a couple of months' support? It's not like I've been lazy or irresponsible with my finances. I just lost my job. Why does he get a pass and I don't?" At that point, my mom started crying, saying I was being harsh and that I shouldn't expect them to always come to my rescue. She said that I needed to learn to be self-sufficient, and that's when I just lost it. I told her that if my brother was the golden child who could do no wrong, then maybe they should just go ahead and adopt him instead of pretending they treated us equally. I ended up hanging up on them because at that point, I couldn't keep my composure. Afterward, I was overwhelmed with guilt. I knew I had lashed out, but I felt like I had every right to. They were picking favorites, and it hurt. I've always been the one who worked hard, never asked for handouts, and generally kept my head down, but now that I needed help, I felt like I wasn't even worth the effort. A few days later, my mom texted me, saying I needed to apologize for what I said. She said that they were just trying to teach me a valuable lesson and that I was being too emotional about the situation. She also added that she didn't like how I made it sound like Eric was getting special treatment, because, in her words, we're just doing what's best for him right now. I didn't respond right away, and now I'm stuck in this weird situation. I don't feel like I was wrong for asking for help, but I'm also worried that I might have gone too far with my words. On the one hand, I know I need to figure things out on my own, but I also feel like it's unfair that my parents treated Eric's situation as more urgent than mine. I feel like I was left out in the cold because I've always been the strong one. So, Reddit, AITA for calling my parents out for supporting my brother financially but refusing to help me when I lost my job? Did I cross a line? Or am I justified in feeling like they're playing favorites? AITA for telling my mom that I won't attend my brother's graduation because she disinvited me from my own? I, 27F, am struggling with some family drama, and I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong here. It's been a few months since the incident, and the fallout has been pretty significant, especially with my mom and brother. I know I might sound a little bitter, but I feel like I'm being treated unfairly, and I'm having trouble letting it go. Here's what happened. First, some background. I have an older brother, Jason, 29M, and a younger sister, Lily, 24F. I've always had a decent relationship with both of them, though Jason and I have always been a bit distant. We get along, but we're not exactly best friends. Lily and I are pretty close, and I think we're more in sync when it comes to things like family values and respect. Our parents, especially our mom, have always had a weird way of treating us. She's very involved in our lives, but there are some issues with favoritism that I've always tried to ignore. Jason is the golden child, and I've accepted that for the most part. He's the one who got all the praise growing up, whether he earned it or not. He's very charismatic, and it's clear that my mom is constantly trying to prove how proud she is of him, so I never really questioned it much. Lily and I, on the other hand, always felt like we had to work harder to get any recognition from her. There were times growing up where I felt like I was the one who had to be the responsible one because my mom was so preoccupied with Jason's life. But again, I let it slide, assuming that's just how families work. Fast forward to this year, and it's Jason's turn to graduate with his master's degree. My family, including me, was invited to the ceremony. When I first got the invitation, I was genuinely excited for him. I know that Jason worked hard for it, even though he doesn't always show it, and it felt like a good moment to celebrate with him and the family. My mom was over the moon. She was planning a huge party afterward and made sure to tell me how important it was for everyone to be there to celebrate Jason's accomplishments. Here's where things went downhill. A couple of weeks before the graduation, my mom called me. She said that she needed to have a serious talk with me, which was a little unusual. When I called her back, she told me that she had made the decision to uninvite me from Jason's graduation party. I was stunned. I asked her why, and she said that it was because I had caused too much drama during the last family gathering we had a few months ago. Apparently, she thought I had been disrespectful to Jason and his girlfriend at a family dinner, which was not true at all. To be clear, there was no major drama. I had a casual conversation with Jason's girlfriend, and it was fine. But apparently, my mom had interpreted one of my comments the wrong way and thought I was being passive-aggressive. She told me that she didn't want any negativity at the party and that if I wasn't willing to put the past behind me, she couldn't have me there. I was shocked. I asked her why she was letting one minor incident ruin the celebration, and she said, "I just can't have you bringing tension into a day that should be about Jason and his achievements." I was hurt, honestly. I felt like I had been singled out. I hadn't been disrespectful to anyone, but my mom was acting like I was some kind of problem child. She didn't seem to care that I was genuinely happy for Jason or that I was looking forward to celebrating his success. It didn't make sense to me that she was willing to put the whole family's happiness on hold for the sake of one misunderstanding. After she hung up, I stewed over it for a couple of days, trying to wrap my mind around why she was acting this way. I didn't want to make a scene, but I couldn't let it go either. I tried calling her back and told her that I didn't think it was fair to disinvite me over something so trivial. She doubled down, saying it was her decision and that she just wanted peace on the day of the graduation. I asked her if this meant she would treat me equally at future family events, and she told me she would think about it. The whole situation left me feeling like I wasn't a priority, and it was painful. To make matters worse, after I was disinvited, my mom started posting about Jason's graduation party on social media. She posted pictures of the party plans, talking about how excited she was for the big day, but never once mentioned anything about my involvement in the event. It felt like a public slap in the face. She was celebrating my brother's accomplishments, but I was completely erased from the narrative. At that point, I decided I couldn't go to Jason's graduation ceremony either. If my mom wasn't going to let me attend the party, then I wasn't going to play along like everything was okay. I texted her and told her that I wouldn't be attending the ceremony or the celebration afterward. I explained that it hurt me to be treated like an afterthought, and that if she didn't see how unfair this was, then I couldn't pretend like it was okay. Jason called me right away after he found out. He said I was being dramatic and that it wasn't a big deal. He told me that I shouldn't be making everything about me and that I should be happy for him. I tried to explain how hurtful it was to be excluded, especially given the context, but he just didn't get it. He said I should let it go for the sake of family. I told him that if family meant excluding me and treating me unfairly, then maybe I didn't need to be part of it. My mom has since been texting me, asking me to reconsider, saying that I'm making a huge mistake. She says that it's not worth letting a minor family disagreement affect the relationships we have, but I still feel like I was disrespected. She insists that I'll regret this, but I can't help but feel like my feelings are being completely ignored. So now, my family is upset with me for not attending the graduation and the party, and they keep telling me I'm making things worse. But I still feel like I'm in the right here. I don't think I'm asking for much, just basic respect and fairness. But I'm also worried that I'm making a big mistake by not just letting it go and showing up for the graduation. So, Reddit, AITA for telling my mom that I won't attend my brother's graduation because she disinvited me from my own? Am I overreacting? Or do I have every right to stand my ground here? AITA for confronting my friend for not helping me after I gave her $5,000 to help her with her business? I, 29F, have a friend, Sarah, 30F, who I've known for almost 10 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. Over the years, our friendship has gone through ups and downs, but we've always had each other's backs. Last year, Sarah started a small business. She's always been passionate about it, but it's been a real struggle for her. There were times when she'd vent about not making enough money or struggling to get clients, and I tried to be supportive. She told me multiple times that her business was on the brink of closing down because she just didn't have enough cash flow to keep it running. That's when I made the decision to offer her financial help. At first, I didn't think much of it. I've always been a bit financially secure, and I wanted to help out my friend. I didn't want to see her fail because I know how much this business meant to her. After thinking it through for a couple of weeks, I offered to lend her $5,000 to help her get her business back on track. I didn't expect her to pay me back right away. I just wanted her to know that I believed in her and that I was there for her. She was incredibly grateful, and I felt like I was doing a good thing. I made it clear that it was a loan and that we could figure out a repayment plan later when things were better for her. She promised me she would pay me back once she was making money again. She seemed truly thankful, and I felt proud that I could help her out. Fast forward a year, and things have changed, but not in the way I expected. Sarah's business has barely improved, but she still hasn't paid me a cent. I've checked in with her every few months about the loan, asking when she might be able to start repaying me. Every time, she gives me the same excuse. I'm not in a good place financially. I've had some setbacks, or I'm still trying to make things work. I understand that business can be tough, but it's been over a year, and I'm starting to feel frustrated. Recently, Sarah posted on social media that her business was finally getting there and that she had hired a new team member to help her expand. She shared pictures of a new office space and talked about how everything was turning around. I was happy for her, but I couldn't help feeling like she was thriving in some ways and still couldn't manage to pay back the $5,000 I gave her. At this point, it was starting to feel like I was being taken for granted. I decided it was time to have an honest conversation. I reached out to Sarah and asked if we could talk about the loan. I told her that I had been patient for a long time, but I needed to know when she planned to pay me back. She responded by saying that she was still struggling, that things weren't as great as they seemed, and that I needed to be patient a little longer. I explained that I wasn't asking for all of it right away, but I needed something. A few $100s, anything. She still didn't seem to get it. That's when I confronted her more directly. I told her that I felt like she wasn't taking my loan seriously and that it seemed like she was living a comfortable life while I was still waiting to be paid back. I reminded her that I had supported her when she was struggling, but now it felt like she was just using me as a safety net while she built up her own success. Sarah was really upset when I brought it up, and she accused me of not being a true friend. She said that if I really cared about her, I wouldn't be pressuring her for money. She claimed that I didn't understand how hard it was to run a business and that I should be more patient with her. She even went as far as saying that I should have never loaned her the money in the first place if I was going to act like this. I was shocked by her response. I thought we had always been supportive of each other, and I never expected her to turn on me like this. I'm really torn because I feel like I did something good by helping her, but at the same time, I'm feeling really taken advantage of. On one hand, I don't want to ruin our friendship. But on the other hand, I don't want to keep giving her a free pass when I'm still waiting for something in return. I've been thinking about cutting ties with her, or at least asking for the money back in full. But I'm worried that doing so will destroy our friendship. Am I the asshole for confronting her about the loan and asking for some kind of repayment? AITA for refusing to forgive my parents after they made my childhood friend feel like she wasn't welcome in our home? I'm writing this because I'm stuck in a situation with my parents, and I'm genuinely not sure if I'm overreacting or if I have a valid reason to be upset. It involves my childhood friend, Rachel, 28F, and a recent conflict with my parents that has left me torn. I, 30F, have known Rachel since we were 5 years old. We grew up together, went to school together, and our families have always been close. Over the years, Rachel became more like a sister to me than just a friend. My parents have always liked her, and we spent countless holidays, birthdays, and family gatherings together. She was basically another child in our family, and I always thought my parents appreciated her as much as I did. However, everything changed recently when Rachel came over to my house for a weekend visit. Let me explain the situation that led to the fallout. About 6 months ago, Rachel went through a difficult breakup with her long-term boyfriend, Adam. They had been together for over 5 years, and the breakup was messy. She was devastated, and as her best friend, I did everything I could to support her. I'd spend hours listening to her vent, helping her pick up the pieces, and generally being there for her. Around that time, I noticed that Rachel seemed a little more distant from my parents than usual. I chalked it up to her being emotional after the breakup and not wanting to burden anyone else with her issues. I didn't think too much of it at the time. A couple of months later, I invited Rachel to come stay with me for the weekend. I had a spacious apartment, and she had been staying in a small apartment alone since the breakup. She needed a change of scenery, and I wanted to give her a comfortable place to relax and recharge. I told my parents about it, and they were immediately excited to see her. They always enjoyed her company and had even mentioned a few times how they were looking forward to her visit. Rachel arrived on a Friday evening, and everything seemed fine at first. We spent time catching up, and my parents were their usual warm and welcoming selves. But then things started to get weird. On Saturday morning, my mom invited Rachel to join her for a morning coffee and chat. Rachel agreed, and I assumed it would be just another relaxed moment of bonding. However, when Rachel came back from the kitchen an hour later, I could tell something had shifted. She seemed tense, and she was unusually quiet. I didn't say anything right away, but I noticed that she wasn't her usual bubbly self. Later that afternoon, we all sat down to lunch. The conversation was awkward. My dad kept asking Rachel about the breakup, which in hindsight was not a good idea. Rachel didn't seem to want to talk about it much, and I could tell she was getting uncomfortable. She deflected the questions, but my parents pressed her. It felt like they were treating her like she was an open book that they could pick apart. I was starting to get frustrated with how they were handling things, but I kept my mouth shut. That evening, we had dinner, and after that, Rachel excused herself to her room. I figured she just needed some alone time after a long day of being around people, but I was starting to notice a shift in how she was interacting with my parents. The next day, my mom mentioned in passing that Rachel was acting a bit off and that she didn't seem like the same person she used to be. It felt like my mom was talking about Rachel like she wasn't even there. By the time Rachel left on Sunday afternoon, she was visibly uncomfortable. She was polite and thanked my parents for the weekend, but she wasn't her usual self. As soon as we were alone, Rachel broke down. She told me that my parents had made her feel incredibly uncomfortable over the weekend, and that they had made her feel like she was a burden. She explained that they had spent the entire weekend subtly questioning her decisions, like why she hadn't moved on from her ex yet, why she wasn't dating again, and why she was still so upset about the breakup. It was clear that they didn't understand the complexity of her emotions, and they kept pushing her to move on or let it go. Rachel told me that the way my parents had been talking to her felt patronizing and dismissive. They kept telling her that she needed to get out more and stop moping as if her grief wasn't valid. They were treating her like she was broken and in need of fixing. She said she felt like they weren't seeing her as the same person they had known for years. They were only seeing the sad, heartbroken girl and nothing else. I was furious. Rachel was one of the kindest, most emotionally intelligent people I knew. For my parents to treat her like that, especially when they knew what she had been through, felt incredibly wrong. I immediately called my mom to ask what had happened over the weekend. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help but let my anger show. My mom tried to brush it off, saying that she just wanted to help Rachel get out of her rut, and that she didn't mean to make her uncomfortable. But when I pressed her, she admitted that she didn't really understand why Rachel was still so upset about the breakup and thought it had gone on long enough. My dad got involved in the conversation and said something that really set me off. He told me that Rachel was too sensitive and needed to snap out of it because everyone else had moved on from their past relationships. He said that if she didn't, she'd be stuck in the past forever. It felt like they were belittling her pain, and I couldn't understand why they were treating her like that. She had been one of the most important people in our lives for years, and now they were making her feel unwelcome and misunderstood. After that conversation, I told my parents that I wouldn't be attending any family events unless they apologized to Rachel. I explained that she was my best friend and that I would stand by her no matter what. My parents were taken aback and tried to guilt-trip me into thinking I was being too dramatic and that I should just forgive them. But I wasn't willing to let it go. I've tried talking to them since then, but the conversation always ends in more frustration. They think I'm overreacting and that I'm being disloyal to them for defending Rachel. They said that I should just talk to Rachel and tell her that they didn't mean to hurt her, but I don't think that's enough. I think they need to understand that they crossed a line and that they can't treat people like that, especially someone I love like a sister. So, Reddit. AITA for refusing to forgive my parents after they made my childhood friend feel like she wasn't welcome in our home? I feel like I'm justified in my anger, but I'm wondering if I'm being too hard on them. Should I just let it go and move on? Or do I have a right to stand up for Rachel? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of what she said about my body. I, 28F, have been best friends with Rachel, 28F, since we were 12. We met in middle school and became inseparable pretty much immediately. We were each other's rock through all the big life events, high school drama, college stress, breakups, and everything in between. Rachel has always been someone I could trust, and I've always had her back, no matter what. At least, that's how I thought things were. A few months ago, Rachel got engaged to her long-term boyfriend, Tom, 29M. I was ecstatic for her. She's the kind of person who's always dreamed of having a fairy tale wedding, and Tom is a great guy. I've always gotten along with him, so I was looking forward to being a part of her special day. Rachel asked me to be one of her bridesmaids, and of course I said yes. I felt so honored to be a part of her big day. The problem started when we began talking about the bridesmaid dresses. Rachel had a very specific vision for her wedding, and the dresses were supposed to match this vision perfectly. The problem was the dress she chose was a body-hugging, floor-length gown that was quite unforgiving. Rachel wanted all the bridesmaids to look uniform, and she insisted that we all get the same dress, no matter our body types. Now, I'm not exactly a size 2. I've always been on the heavier side, and I've struggled with my weight for years. I've tried every diet and workout routine, but it's always been a challenge for me to lose weight and keep it off. I'm okay with my body most of the time, but I'm not blind to the fact that I don't fit the typical bridesmaid dress body shape. Still, I agreed to try the dress on because I wanted to be supportive of Rachel. When the dresses arrived, I tried mine on, and it was a disaster. The dress didn't fit properly, and I could tell right away that it wasn't going to look good on me. It was tied in all the wrong places, and I felt incredibly self-conscious in it. I showed Rachel the dress, and she immediately said, I was hoping this would be more flattering on you. She wasn't rude about it, but I could tell she was disappointed. She asked me to try a little harder to fit into the dress and suggested I go on a diet to lose a few pounds before the wedding. I was taken aback by the comment, and I told her that I wasn't willing to go on another extreme diet just for her wedding. I wasn't trying to be difficult, but the last time I tried something like that, I ended up feeling miserable and unhealthy. I told her I would try to make the dress work as best as I could, but I wasn't going to drastically change my body for a wedding. Rachel seemed frustrated but said, I just want us all to look perfect on my wedding day. It's really important to me. I tried to explain that I wasn't going to change for the sake of her wedding, but I would still support her and do my best to look presentable. A few weeks later, things took a turn for the worse when Rachel invited me over to her place to talk about the dress situation. When I got there, Rachel was sitting on the couch with a notebook in front of her. She looked serious. She immediately brought up the dress again and said, Look, I really want my bridesmaids to look a certain way. I know it's not your fault, but I can't help but feel like you're not trying hard enough. This is my big day, and I want everything to be perfect. I was stunned. Rachel had always been the type of person who said that the people who loved her would accept her for who she was, no matter what. But now, she was telling me that I wasn't doing enough to make her wedding perfect. She even said that she was thinking about asking me to step down as a bridesmaid if I couldn't make the dress work. She didn't say it outright, but it was heavily implied. I tried to stay calm, but I was hurt. I told Rachel that I was doing my best and that I didn't think it was fair for her to make me feel like I wasn't good enough. I reminded her that she had always been my best friend, and I would be there for her no matter what, but this was starting to feel like too much. I felt like I was being judged for my body, and it wasn't something I could just change for her wedding. Rachel didn't seem to get it. She started crying and said, "I'm just trying to make sure everything is perfect. I've dreamed of this day for so long, and I want all my bridesmaids to look beautiful. Please, just do this for me." I could see she was emotional, but it didn't change the fact that her words were hurting me. I told her that I didn't know if I could be a part of her wedding if this was how things were going to be. I didn't want to be someone's backup bridesmaid just because I wasn't fitting into the perfect image she had in her head. I left her apartment that day feeling completely drained and upset. Over the next few days, I started to think about everything Rachel had said, and it just didn't sit right with me. I tried to talk to my other friends about it, and they all agreed that I shouldn't be made to feel this way, especially by someone I considered family. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I couldn't let this slide. I didn't want to be part of her big day if she was going to make me feel so small and insignificant. Eventually, I called Rachel and told her that I had decided not to attend her wedding. I explained that I couldn't support her in this way if she was going to make me feel like I wasn't good enough because of my body. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't be part of a celebration that made me feel so uncomfortable. Rachel was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was ruining our friendship over something so superficial. She said I was making her big day all about me and that I was letting my insecurities ruin everything. I tried to explain that it wasn't about insecurity. It was about feeling like I wasn't being respected or valued for who I am. But she didn't seem to understand. Now, I'm wondering if I made the right decision. I feel like I've lost my best friend over this, and I'm really hurt by how Rachel has treated me. I've always been there for her, and I feel like she's asking me to change something about myself that I can't just change. AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of what she said about my body?